Well, one of the reasons that I got behind UCSS alongside you is because I saw so much of successful entrepreneurship being done inside UCSS just in a sort of non-for-profit model, right? So you find the capable person, and in this situation, it's Ronald, right? And then you find that person who has a passion and a heart and a willingness to work hard to solve discrete issues.
You don't know suffering. Let me show you what real suffering is like in a place I grew up. So one day, she took him out there, and so Ronald traveled to this community called Buliki, which is where we're active right now, to attend his grandfather's funeral. And he was shocked at what he saw there because, again, people were much worse off than what he experienced. They had no access to clean water. They sent their kids or wives far away to fetch water from dirty ponds that were shared with, cattle. They had no access to malaria medicine, which cost like $3. And someone in the community was dying every day. There was a funeral every single day. A dominant religion was not Christianity or any other organized religion. It was actually witchcraft and voodoo. And he remembers it was one of the darkest places he's ever seen. So he later went to college and became a CPA along with his wife, but he never forgot what he experienced. And so in 2007 is when I met him in the United States. He was chaperoning a kind of a children's choir, and he told me his story about how he wanted to get an advanced degree from the U.S. because it was the best way he felt he could serve the people in Uganda. And I kind of was like, it's kind of a dumb idea, but it wasn't a dumb idea. And after going there, I now know that people with degrees there actually are the CEOs and heads of state in there. And without a degree, you're really no one in Uganda. So this was very, very strategic on his part. He got a college degree in Lindsey Wilson College in Kentucky, and that's where he started the board. I joined that board, and we raised like $100,000 in 2011, and he did, in fact, then go back to Uganda. He could have very easily have, instead of going back to Uganda, like he said, just brought his family to the United States, which is what most people would do in his position, and he did not. And I remember his first picture that he sent, Drew, was this bucket buried in the ground, and he said, "This is my bathroom tonight." And I was like, oh my gosh. This guy's willing to do what I'm not willing to do, right? And so the only thing I can do is support him financially at this point, and that really makes a great partnership with someone like Ronald.
Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, I've seen it myself. A lot of people, once they get the chance to come to the States, they bring their whole family, and they sort of leave their old world behind. So there's a lot of character in that for Ronald. Michael, there's a lot of organizations that do things that are similar: freshwater, housing, medical. So what, in your experience, makes UCSS unique? What makes it better than the other organizations? Why have you poured 163 hours of your time into this last year and in previous years as well?
I don't know if it's necessarily better, but I mean, I have been I wasn't the chairman of a board, but I was a board member, and so I have some experience with working inside a nonprofit. So one of the things that the UCSS is different is its holistic approach. Now, typically, from an entrepreneurial or business perspective, you focus on one thing and you really focus on that one thing and do it really good. And Ronald convinced me that this was not a good idea because you can't just evangelize to someone while they're dying. They're not going to be receptive, okay? On the other hand, it's better to now give them fresh water, which is great, but not when they're dying of malaria. And if you can solve the malaria problem, okay, but it's no good if people don't know how to grow crops and essentially die of starvation. Okay, so I got his point that we needed to address all these things. So we decided to really focus geographically, really, is what we did. But one of the approaches it does is really holistic. And I'm not knocking any organization that is focused just on fresh water or evangelism. I'm just saying that is something that UCS decided not to do, and I really like that. The other one is this philosophy of really helping people help themselves. This is really different than a lot of, especially Western-based nonprofits who typically like to do handouts. And there are situations that require handouts, especially in emergency situations. But in development situations, they're not emergencies. We just tend to simply want to do things for people. And my experience in studying this more is that really does exactly the opposite. It disempowers the local people, that we make them believe that they can't do what they're not good enough. They need us to help them. And that's what we didn't want to do. The downside of this approach is that it took a lot longer. In fact, it probably took, 3-4 solid years before people started to adopt the things that we were training all of our, even how to build a house, how to maintain a well, how to grow crops, all that stuff took 3 or 4 long years, and the board got kind of frustrated with the apparent lack of progress. But then after 4 years, people started to actually adopt these things, and then we moved into another community. And the cool thing about it, the adoption rate wasn't 3 or 4 years, it was like 3 or 4 months. And because we spent so much time cultivating the local villagers and leadership and engaging them versus doing things themselves. And so we have found that this approach really leads to long-lasting transformation. Even if we were to pull out tomorrow, that area would never be the same, and it empowers the people to become self-sufficient. So those are really some of the things that really attract me to this. And again, they're just very stewards of our financials. They're tracked very carefully, and it's almost like a single dollar is like almost 10 times that much in Uganda. And so I just love supporting that organization. They get stuff done too.
I love it. I know I've seen that in talking to you, how much they can get done, how much they focus. What's the vision? So you're talking about where they've gone. You know, it used to take 4 years to build a house. Now it's 4 months. The adoption process has sped up. Looking forward, what's the vision? Where does UCSS want to go?
Yeah, so we have learned a lot. It's to some degree kind of learned on the job by doing. So we started a school, okay, and so we built a classroom building, and then all of a sudden we realized, oh my gosh, well, we needed probably some toilets in a probably some water. Oh gosh, we need some power eventually. So how are we going to do power? We need solar panels. And then we discovered down the road that, oh my gosh, especially in the high school, where girls were just simply dropping off because they were on the way to school, were getting kidnapped, or they were being bribed to marry, or they were kept home by their families, that we needed to build a dormitory. Like, these are all things that we just didn't know up front. And so now we do, doing over 10 years, we kind of now know what a successful medical clinic looks like. We know how many doctors and nurses it takes, how many supplies we need, what kind of equipment, how much it costs and operate. And so we know the same thing for a primary school, elementary school, middle, and high school, or even for building a church, or administering a microfinance program, or for drilling and maintaining wells. So we've kind of now developed this repeatable model. And I love repeatable models, Drew, as you know. Blueprints, baby. I love that. We have like the blueprint. And so the idea, and we've moved this now into different areas. So we built a high school in a different area. As you know, you're supporting a new school that we expanded outside, and then we're leveraging what we learned on the first school into that one. So we're accelerating the ramp up with this thing. And so we think now that we can replicate this model, to other communities and do it much faster.
Michael, one of the reasons that I got behind UCSS alongside you is because I saw so much of successful entrepreneurship being done inside UCSS, just in a sort of non-for-profit model, right? So you find the capable person, and in this situation, it's Ronald, right? And then you find that person who has a passion and a heart and a willingness to work hard to solve discrete issues, right? So what you just talked about, you don't have all of the solutions from day one organization, but you wanted to build a school. You find there's an issue with girls being abducted on the way to school. You solve it with building a dormitory, right? So that's funny. Sort of go. Yeah, I just love how you see the instincts of entrepreneurship happening inside UCSS, and you have a capable person. And when you marry those two persons, that makes me excited to get engaged.
Yeah, that's funny you say that, because I consider myself, Ronald, an entrepreneur. It's just he does it in a nonprofit, right. But he really is. He's resourceful. He's got leadership issues. In fact, I talked to him a couple years ago about what we're doing with EOS, implementing EOS. He implemented it. He goes, oh man, absolute game changer, right? So he's applying a lot of the same principles we can do in business in a nonprofit environment. The problematic is exactly the same. He doesn't have revenue per se from a product, but if he doesn't ensure that capital is being raised, in other words, if the business doesn't have revenue, you can't pay the teachers. You can't buy medical supplies. So he's got to deal with all the same things that we're dealing with, just in a nonprofit environment.
Michael, one of the things that a careful, or one might say a skeptical mind says is, why do you trust this organization? How do you know they're going to treat your dollars well? How do you know this guy's not, taking advantage of it and buying nice houses or lots of cars, when you're not looking? Why are you putting, as you said, 6 figures into this organization? What's your fundamental trust behind it?
Yeah. Well, I've been to his house. It's nice, but it's not, millions of dollars. Nice, not even close. But to answer your question, I mean, here's the thing: when you're donating money, you want to know two things. Well, ideally, what you want is you want to know you're making an impact. Number one, and you really want to know how is your money being spent. And if you know how the money is being spent, now you can also kind of measure impact. And so I don't love personally investing and donating to very large organizations, multi-gazillion, because I don't really know where money is going. I mean, it could be that all of it or most of it is going to some kind of overhead, office buildings, et cetera, et cetera. Overhead is necessary, especially to administer the organization and to fundraise. The marketing is critical. But the reason I like, first of all, I think to me it's always a person. It's like in a syndication partnership, right? Is who you partner with. That level of trust has to be there. So I like supporting small organizations where I know the person, like I know the head guy or the head gal, and I just really like them. I trust them. I think they're good people. I've been around them for a little bit, and Ronald is one of those people. But one of the things that we do well is there's a high degree of accountability in many different ways. How we spend our money. We do have we love non-designated operating funds. It's the hardest thing to raise. Everybody wants to build something. No one wants to actually pay for the operation. Okay, super irritating. But we do have designated funds that are guarded very carefully. So sometimes we'll have $100,000 in designated funds reserved for this one thing, and sometimes we're short to fund an operational budget because of that separation. And number two is we really measure the impact. So especially since Ronald started implementing EOS, he's tracking everything. So every ministry has its own scorecards, its own rocks, and he puts out these really elaborate reports by ministry that shows you exactly how many people have used a particular well, right? How many people are going to school? How many people are serving a medical clinic? So let's say you want to support the medical clinic, you would get a very detailed report of what that ministry is doing and how it's growing year over year. So I really like how it measures the impact. So I think just UCSS is kind of a rare organization in the sense that my experience has been the level of accountability has been very low, and also I can't really measure my impact. So those are kind of two things that UCSS does differently.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So what's the biggest need for UCSS right now? What's the next thing that it needs to get where it wants to go?
Yeah, so I think based on our vision, so we're really looking for what I call legacy partners who want to, adopt all or part of a ministry and support it for 3 to 5 years. So, let's say you're called to support the medical ministry, you're a medical doctor, or you just really like that kind of ministry. That ministry costs about $53,000 per year, and that covers the doctors, the nurses, medical supplies. So for just $53,000 a year, that medical ministry serves 4,000 people. Now, if you do the math on that, it's like $13 per person, okay? It's like for every visit, it's $13. And these are basic, like life-changing. People don't go in there because they have like COVID, honestly. They go in there because they have malaria or they're dying of malnutrition or something really bad. So for $13, you're not just making someone feel a little better, you're like saving people's lives. Yep. And so kind of we're looking for partners like that. At the end of the day, you can always support an organization at multiple levels, whether it's $53,000 for 3 to 5 years, or you're sponsoring a student for $30 a month. We have something for everyone. The bottom line is that your US dollar is literally like 1 for 10. I mean, like, for example, we build a school building that houses, 80 students or something. It costs like $15,000, like including the windows and the roof. That's insane to me. I forget 1 to 10. It might be worse. I mean, I don't know what a school building costs in the United States. Maybe 1 to 10. Maybe it costs $150,000 if you use, cheaper materials. But the point is that US dollars goes so far in Uganda. It's amazing.
Yeah. Awesome, Michael. Well, if people are like, hey, I love this, I'd love to get involved in this too. How can people get involved with what's happening at UCSS?
Yeah, I actually put up a webpage about this at themichaelblanc.com/Uganda. And you can learn more about the mission. There's some links to the Uganda UCSS website. And there's also a place where you can sponsor a student. And it's really cool. They have like different students with their photo and their name, and you can sponsor them for $30, $50, $100 per month. And you can actually start a letter correspondence with them. So it's really cool. That's the easiest way to get involved. And so you can access that from themichaelblanc.com /Uganda. And if you click through to the Uganda website there, just hop on their newsletter. Ronald does a really, really good job also on social media to kind of post videos and stuff, what's going on. You'll get these reports, and you can just kind of spy on us for a little while and support us that way.